There's a specific kind of arrogance that only exists in people who spend their lives managing other people's hedges. I live on Pine Lake, a deep crystal blue glacial lake in northern Michigan. My family cabin has stood on the western shore since 1952. My grandfather built it with cedar he milled himself and fieldstone he hauled out of the creek. It's not a mansion, it's a fortress of memory. But Pine Lake changed. In the 90s, developers moved in, carved up the old family farms and created the Cascades, a high-end subdivision with a homeowners association, HOA, that has more rules than a maximum security prison. My property, however, was grandfathered in. My deed predates their bylaws by 4 decades. I don't pay their dues, and I don't follow their neutral earth tone paint schemes. That is, until Brenda became HOA president. Brenda didn't just want to manage the neighborhood, she wanted to own the lake. And she had a problem. Her son, Kyle. Kyle is 26, has been fired from 3 different marketing jobs his mom found for him, and currently lives in her basement. Brenda decided that Kyle needed a starter home to build equity. But the housing market is a nightmare, and Kyle doesn't have 2 nickels to rub together. Then she looked at my cabin. My lot is 2 acres of prime lakefront, sitting right next to the HOA's shared beach and their head office, a small converted barn where Brenda spends her days issuing fines for grass that's 3.1 inches tall. Brenda didn't just want my land, she wanted to annex it to make Kyle the lakefront prince of the neighborhood. I found out her plan when I received an notice of eminent domain from the HOA's private legal counsel. They claimed my septic system was an environmental hazard to the lake and that the HOA had the right to seize the property for remediation and community utility. It was a blatant, illegal land grab. They were offering me $120,000 for a property worth $1.2 million. Brenda wasn't just coming for my home, she was coming for my life savings.
I'm a welder. I deal in hard facts and molten steel. I don't like lawyers, and I don't like drama. So I did the neighborly thing. I walked over to the HOA head office on a Tuesday morning, still wearing my work blues, holding a copy of my original 1952 warranty deed. Brenda was sitting behind a mahogany desk that looked too expensive for a non-profit association. Kyle was there too, feet up on a coffee table, scrolling through his phone. "Brenda," I said, putting the deed on her desk, "I think your lawyer got the wrong address. You sent me a seizure notice for a property that isn't part of your association." Brenda didn't even look at the paper. She just adjusted her glasses and gave me a smile that was colder than the lake in January. "Hank, let's be realistic," she said. "The Cascades has changed the lake for the better. Your structure is an eyesore. It's an old-growth fire hazard with an antiquated plumbing system. We've had 3 anonymous complaints about your runoff this month alone." "I don't have runoff, Brenda. My septic was inspected and certified by the county last year. It's a sealed tank system. You know that." "The county is slow, Hank. The HOA has its own standards. Kyle here is going to lead the green restoration project for that lot once you've moved out. We're offering you a fair price to avoid a long, expensive court battle that you will lose." Kyle chimed in without looking up. "Yeah, Pops, it's for the good of the lake. Plus, that cabin is basically a shack. I'm doing you a favor by tearing it down." I felt the heat rising in my chest, the kind of heat I usually reserve for a tib torch. "Listen to me, both of you," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "I am giving you one chance to rescind that notice. I have the documented county inspection. I have a 1952 deed that specifically excludes this parcel from any future master-planned associations. If you move forward with this, you aren't just starting a legal fight, you're starting a war.
And I've spent 30 years building things that don't break. You don't want to find out what happens when I decide to take something apart." Brenda chuckled. She actually leaned back and laughed. "Hank, we have a $50,000 a year legal retainer. You have a lunchbox. Don't be difficult. You have 30 days to vacate, or we start the foreclosure process on the liens we've already placed against your property for environmental non-compliance." I walked out of that office without another word. I didn't yell, I didn't slam the door. I just pulled out my phone and recorded the entire walk back to my porch, narrating the conversation I'd just had. Then I sent an email to the HOA's official address, CCing the county clerk, titled "Formal Cease and Desist, Property Encroachment and Fraudulent Liens." I had my warning on record. Now it was time to find the kill switch. I called Arthur. Arthur is the kind of guy who knows where the bodies are buried because he's the one who wrote the burial contracts. He's been a title attorney in this county since before Brenda was born. I told him to look at the head office parcel and my family's original 1950s land split records. "Hank," Arthur said 3 days later, his voice crackling over the speakerphone, "you're not going to believe this. Brenda isn't just a bully, she's an idiot. She's been so focused on annexing the lakefront that she never bothered to check the reversionary rights on the office lot." "Speak English, Arthur," I grunted. "In 1952, your grandfather sold a small .5-acre corner of his land to the Pine Lake Boating Club, the precursor to the HOA. But he included a restrictive covenant and a specific use easement. The deed stated that the land could only be used for the storage and maintenance of watercraft. If the land was ever used for commercial office space, residential management, or any non-boating activity, the ownership of that parcel would automatically revert back to the original estate." My heart skipped a beat. The head office, it used to be a boat shed, right? "Exactly," Arthur said. "When they turned it into a fancy HOA management office with a paved parking lot and a mahogany desk, they violated the covenant. Technically, the HOA doesn't own their headquarters. You do. You are the sole heir to your grandfather's estate. That office is sitting on your dirt. And there's more. Keep going. The HOA's shared beach access, the one Brenda uses as her private VIP club, that's an innocent encroachment. Your grandfather gave them a permissive use agreement in 1968. It wasn't a permanent easement. It was a handshake on paper that could be revoked at any time with 30 days' notice if the peace and quiet enjoyment of the primary residence was disturbed." I looked out my window at the HOA office. I saw Brenda's white SUV parked in the lot. I saw Kyle setting up a volleyball net on my beach. They thought they were using the law to take my home. They didn't realize they had built their entire kingdom on a foundation of sand, and I owned the shovel. I didn't call a moving van. I called a surveyor and a fencing contractor. The surveyor, a guy named Rick who looked like he'd been living in the woods for a month, showed up on a Monday morning. He didn't care about Brenda shouting or Kyle's threats to call his dad. Rick just followed the iron pins. He found the original 1952 marker, a rusted iron stake buried 2 feet deep under the HOA's paved parking lot. He spray-painted a neon pink line right across the asphalt, slicing the HOA's parking lot in half. Then he moved to the office building itself. He hammered a stake 6 inches away from the HOA's front door. "Hank," Rick said, wiping sweat from his forehead, "the entire building, the office, the deck, the storage shed, is 100% inside the reversionary parcel. And since they changed the use of the land, the boundary isn't just a line anymore, it's a wall. This whole corner of the subdivision is technically your backyard." While Rick was marking the lines, I saw Brenda come storming out of the office. She was clutching her iPad like a shield. "What is this?" she shrieked. "You're defacing HOA property. I'm calling the sheriff." "Go ahead, Brenda," I said, leaning against my old truck. "Tell the sheriff you're trespassing on my family estate. Arthur, my attorney, is already at the courthouse filing the quiet title action and the revocation of permissive use for the beach." "You're insane," Kyle yelled, stepping up to me. "My mom runs this lake. You're just a dirty welder in a shack." I didn't flinch. I just pointed to the pink line on the ground. "Kyle, you see that pink paint? That's the end of your starter home dream. And Brenda, you might want to clear your desk. I've decided I don't like the aesthetic of this office. It's an eyesore. I think I'm going to restore it to its original condition, which was a place to gut fish and store old nets." Brenda's face went a shade of purple I didn't think was biologically possible. "You can't do this. We have an association. We have bylaws." "Your bylaws only apply to members, Brenda," I said, pulling a heavy-duty chain-link fence post out of the back of my truck. "And as of 10 minutes ago, I'm not a neighbor. I'm your landlord, and your lease just expired." Brenda thought she had 30 days to process my eviction. She figured the legal system would move at its usual glacial pace, giving her time to file countersuits and tie me up in discovery for 2 years. She forgot one thing about blue-collar guys in Michigan. When we get a project in our heads, we don't wait for a committee meeting. We start at sunrise. On Tuesday morning, at exactly 6 a.m., I didn't pull up in a sedan. I pulled up in my heavy-duty flatbed truck, followed by 3 of my guys from the welding shop. We weren't carrying wood. We were carrying 4-inch diameter industrial steel pipes, 10 feet long, and enough high-tensile chain-link mesh to secure a federal prison. As a welder, I don't build pretty fences. I build permanent ones. Brenda arrived at 8:30, her white SUV gliding into the parking lot. She stopped dead when she saw the first post being driven into the asphalt with a pneumatic hammer. Thud, thud, thud. She jumped out of the car, her iPad already out and filming. "Hank, what do you think you're doing? You're destroying a shared amenity parking lot. This is a violation of the HOA safety code." I didn't stop the hammer. I just pointed at the neon pink line Sarah had sprayed. "Morning, Brenda. This isn't a shared lot. According to the quiet title papers Arthur served to the HOA's registered agent an hour ago, this asphalt belongs to the grandfathered Pine Lake estate. That's me. And since I have an unpermitted commercial structure, that's your office, sitting on my land, I need to secure the site for insurance purposes." "You can't fence in the head office," she screamed. "The records are in there. The server. I have a meeting with the landscaping committee at 10. "Better find a Starbucks, Brenda," I said, signaling my guy Mike to start the welder. The blue spark of the arc welder lit up the morning mist. "I'm installing an agricultural security perimeter. In this county, a property owner is allowed to install a 10-foot fence for the protection of livestock or equipment without a pre-approval permit, provided it's on a parcel over 1 acre. I've got 2 acres, and I'm protecting my peace and quiet." By 10 a.m., the fence was 4 feet high. By noon, it was 8 feet of jagged steel and heavy mesh. I didn't just fence the line. I wrapped the fence around the entire HOA office building, leaving exactly 3 inches of clearance from their mahogany deck. I didn't block the door. That would be unlawful imprisonment, but I built the fence so close to the stairs that Brenda had to turn sideways to squeeze through. And the parking lot? I fenced off 80% of it, leaving her SUV trapped inside the grandfathered zone. Kyle showed up around lunch, driving his Jeep over the grass to avoid the fence. He looked like he was ready to play tough guy. "Move the truck, Pops," Kyle said, his chest puffed out. "You're blocking the public beach access. I've got a boat delivery coming in an hour." I wiped the grease off my hands and looked him in the eye. Kyle, go back and read the letter Arthur sent. The permissive use agreement from 1968 was revoked. This beach is now private property. If a boat hits this shore, it's an illegal landing. I've already notified the DNR, Department of Natural Resources, that I'm conducting shoreline restoration. That means no volleyball, no coolers, and definitely no entitled kids with popped collars.
Brenda did exactly what I expected. She called the sheriff. Around 2 p.m., Deputy Miller pulled up. Miller is a guy I've known for 20 years. We've hunted together. I welded the hitch on his boat trailer for free. He got out of his cruiser, adjusted his belt, and looked at the 8-foot-tall industrial cage I'd built around the HOA office. He let out a low whistle. "Damn, Hank. You planning on keeping a tiger in there?" Brenda ran to him, practically tripping over her own heels. "Officer, arrest him. He's trespassing, he's destroyed the parking lot, and he's holding the association's records hostage." Miller looked at me, then back at Brenda. "Hank, you got the papers?" I reached into my Carhartt pocket and handed him the notarized certificate of reversion and the surveyor's encroachment report. "Miller," I said, "the deed from 1952 is a fee simple determinable. It means the second they stopped using this land for boat storage and turned it into an office, the title automatically snapped back to me. No court order required for ownership, just a filing of the violation. They've been trespassing for 15 years. I'm just now putting up the walls." Miller spent 10 minutes reading the documents. He's not a lawyer, but in a rural county, deputies know property law better than most city attorneys. He looked at the pink flags, then at the fence, then at Brenda. "Ma'am," Miller said, his voice heavy, "this is a civil matter, but from where I'm standing, Hank has a certified survey and a deed that says he owns the dirt under your feet. If he wants to build a fence on his own land, I can't stop him. Now, if you want to sue him to prove that deed is invalid, you can, but until a judge tells me otherwise, this is his backyard." "But my car," Brenda pointed to her trapped SUV, "I can't get it out." "Hank," Miller asked, "you gonna let her get her car out?" "Sure," I said, "as soon as she signs a waiver of liability and pays a $50 storage and access fee for the 6 hours she's been parked on my private lot. Cash only, no HOA checks." Brenda looked like she was going to have a stroke. She reached into her designer bag, pulled out a $50 bill, threw it at me, and scrambled into her SUV. I opened the gate just wide enough for her to squeeze through, and she sped off, kicking up gravel and nearly taking out her own mailbox. The war didn't end that day, but the land grab was dead. Once the HOA's legal team actually looked at the 1952 deed, something they should have done before Brenda started her annexation plan, they realized they were sunk. If they fought me in court, they'd not only lose the office, but they'd be liable for 15 years of back rent for using the land illegally. We reached a settlement in 3 weeks. The HOA agreed to vacate the office building and move their headquarters to a rented space in town. They had to pay me $40,000 in damages for the fraudulent liens they tried to place on my cabin. In exchange, I agreed not to sue the board members individually for fiduciary malfeasance. As for the building, I kept it. I tore down the fancy mahogany deck and the head office signage. I spent a weekend with my guys gutting the inside. Now, it's exactly what my grandfather intended it to be, a boat shed. I keep my 1954 Christcraft in there, along with my welding tanks and a big rack for my fishing nets. Brenda was forced to resign as HOA president after the neighborhood found out she had cost the association nearly $100,000 in legal fees and lost assets.
She and Kyle moved away 6 months later. Last I heard, Kyle is working at a car wash 2 counties over, and Brenda is currently suing her new HOA over the color of her neighbor's curtains. Some people never learn. The beach is quiet now. I didn't keep the industrial fence up. It was ugly, and I'm not a monster. I replaced it with a simple, low field stone wall. I let the neighbors come down to the water, but they have to ask permission first, and they do. Because now, everyone on Pine Lake knows where the line is. So, let me ask you something. If a Karen tried to seize your family's history for her kids' equity, would you have waited for a court date in 2028? Or would you have fired up the welder and built yourself a fortress? Drop a comment below. I'm Hank, and I'll be out here on the porch, enjoying the view of a lake that finally belongs to the people who actually respect the dirt.